What's up, carnivores? Zach here with American Smoke, and today we're talking about a question that I've been getting asked, and just recently somebody asked me, Zach, what's up with the rest? How do I do the rest? How long is the rest supposed to work? Does the rest take place in the refrigerator? Let's get to all that right now as we discuss what is the rest. So basically and essentially, the rest is the end of the work, okay? So if all of your hard work, all of your seasoning and brining and basting and marinating and injecting and everything, and then smoking and monitoring and temp probing and wrapping and everything like that, once all that's done, it's time for the rest. The rest is when you go lay down and you take a nap and you sleep. No, wait. That's not the rest. The rest, that's what your protein's gonna do. Your protein's gonna take a rest, okay? So let's talk about that. Let's get into the science a little bit, just a little bit. I'm not gonna get too technical with the science, but we are gonna get mildly scientific. I'm not Bill Nye or anything, but I did read a couple articles before I made this video. That way I could sound like a smart guy. I like to sound like a smart guy. Basically, as you cook proteins, doesn't really matter what it is, whether it's pork, chicken, beef, turkey, or platypus, it don't matter. If you're cooking it, it's made out of protein. And as proteins raise in temperature, they start to squeeze out water, which most proteins are made of about 70% water, okay? Until the protein, and I'm tired of saying protein, I'm gonna say brisket, okay? We're gonna use the word brisket. So as the brisket approaches 120 degrees, the protein strands, the strands of meat down at the molecular level start to shorten and tighten in a lengthwise manner. So they start to shrink lengthwise, and that starts to squeeze some moisture out of your brisket. So that's when you start to see that baby start to sweat a little bit. As the internal temperature of your brisket passes 120 degrees, they also start to shrink from side to side. So now we're getting a big time squeeze on those meat fibers and losing a lot of moisture in the process. If you've ever heard somebody say, that brisket's starting to tighten up, that's what's going on. Individual strands and individual little meat fibers are all tightening up and squeezing out their moisture. In this process, you can lose 30 to 40% of the mass of your brisket. That means if you put a 15-pound brisket into the smoker, you're gonna take out about a 10-pound brisket, okay? But hey, that 10-pound brisket's gonna be a whole lot better than that 15-pound brisket was, I can promise you that, especially if you incorporate the rest. So now that we've got all the science stuff out of the way, let's talk about what the rest really is. The entire time you're cooking that brisket and it's tightening up and the moisture's being pushed out, the proteins are being broke down initially, and then eventually you get into the collagen and the fat and the connective tissue, and that all starts to break down as you approach those higher internal temperatures, getting up to that 200-degree mark. Once you get to that 200-degree mark, 205 on your brisket, some people say 203, but that's very specific. Once you get to that point, you do not want it to get any higher, because much like a chicken breast or a pork chop that you want to pull closer to the 160 mark on your chicken breast, if you let that get up to 170, those meat fibers squeeze so tight that they push all your moisture straight out of the chicken, and you end up with a dry, boring chicken. Nobody likes that. You want to cut open that breast and you want that little juice to run out. That way it just makes you know it's going to taste good before you ever touch it to your tongue. Chicken breast, don't let it get to 170, pull at 160, 165 max. When you're doing your brisket, we're going to rest at that 200-degree mark. And so the process typically goes when the brisket gets to around 170, and this is really the same with Boston butts. Once it gets to that 170 mark, somewhere in there, some people do 165, some people go all the way up to 180. That's when you're going to take either butcher paper or foil, and you're going to wrap it up, and that's going to hold in some of that moisture, and it's going to speed up your cooking process through the stall. Once it gets up to the mark where you know it's done, you know that temperature has dissolved all of the cartilage, all of the connective tissue, all of the collagen, broke it down into gelatin, which provides moisture to your meat. Once you reach that point, that is when it's time for the rest, and the rest is essential. If you do not decide to rest your brisket at this point, if you just cut right into it, you're gonna see all this fat running out and it's just gonna be covering your cutting board. And you'll be like, man, look how juicy my brisket is. How juicy your brisket was, because all of that juice that's running out of that brisket's not in there anymore. It's on the stinking cutting board, and it ain't no good on that cutting board. What I like to do on larger cuts of protein, such as brisket, Boston butts, beef ribs, and the like, a minimum of an hour and a half. You're gonna leave that wrapped up in your paper. You're gonna let it sit out for just a little while to let out some of the heat, because you've got what's called carryover cooking. When we're talking about carryover cooking, we're talking about the process that took place the entire time that you cooked your brisket, where the heat was on the outside, wob, 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 the smoker's pushing it all over the outside, and it slowly makes its way into the center. And when you pull it out of the smoker, some of that heat still making its way towards the center. And if you throw towels all over it, lock it in a cooler, the moment it comes out of the smoker, more of that heat's gonna keep pushing in and raise the internal temperature of the center of your brisket past the 205, 210 mark. On a brisket, you can expect a 5 to 10 degree carryover on temperature. That's why a lot of people don't pull at 205, they say pull at 200, 203. That way you carry over to about the 208, 210 mark. But what I like to do, I like to set my proteins on a counter or something for a little while, monitor the temp with a meat probe, and watch that temp come down into like the 170 mark, okay? So you're gonna see it rise up a little bit, then it's gonna start coming back down. Around 175, usually I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna wrap that thing up in some towels, or either lay some towels down in a cooler. I'm gonna set it down on top of the towels, lay a couple more towels over it, close the cooler. This is your brisket, and this is your Boston butts. These are your large cuts, okay? You're gonna set them in there and you're gonna let them rest for a minimum of an hour and a half. Because in the same way that as those fibers are tightening up and they're pushing out the water, as the temperature comes down, those proteins relax a little bit and they take some of that moisture back in. The fats and the collagens that break down into gelatin that are very runny, that you see running out of your brisket, if you leave it resting, they will begin to become less viscous, less runny, more thick. They will remain inside your protein and they will create that velvety, rich, succulent bite that we're all after in the world of barbecue. So keep that in mind. Typically, what you want on the larger cuts, you want 2 to 4 hour rest. Monitoring the temperature occasionally to make sure that you stay over 140 degrees, because that is food safe. I typically keep it at about, 145. If it gets below that, it's time to eat, or it's time to set my oven on low. Put that in there, and the oven will just keep it at food safe for as long as you need it. So let's say, you did a terrible job timing your brisket and you're feeding people and they're not gonna be here for 4 hours and it's already been resting for 3. What do? Stick it in the oven, keep it warm, you're gonna be fine. Some people say that the finished product in that instance is even better. Might be worth a try. We might need to make a video on that. We'll see. When it comes to smaller cuts, you're looking for about a 15 to 30 minute rest. Closer to 15 to 20 minutes in my preference. Same thing's gonna happen. Same process. Those juices are going to cool. They're gonna pull back up into the proteins and you're gonna get a better product when it's all said and done. When you're talking about chicken breasts, and pork chops, things like that, thinner cuts, usually the time that it takes to get it off the grill or out of the smoker into the house or wherever you're gonna eat and onto a plate for you to eat, a lot of times that's enough. Or just say 10 minutes. 10 minutes is the amount of time that you wanna rest a steak. Most steaks, 10-minute rest, you lightly or loosely cover them with some foil, and that's gonna cause a lot of that juice to remain in that steak, a lot of that juice to pull back up into that steak, and you are gonna get a far superior steak if you let it rest. Trust me on the steak, let it rest. Do not take that steak off the grill, cut into it, take a bite, because the next bites are gonna be, you're gonna see this huge puddle of liquid in your plate, and you're gonna be like, man, what in the world? But to recap, larger cuts, 2 to 4 hours. I prefer to say an hour and a half minimum. 2 or more, that's great. Let it come down to 175, 170, somewhere in there, 180 maybe. Then put it into the cooler to reduce the overcooking as the temperature continues to push itself into the center of your protein. Put it in the cooler, let it rest. If it takes longer than you think it's gonna take for you to get to the point where you're ready to serve, throw it in the oven. Don't put it in the refrigerator. Do not put it in the refrigerator. You're gonna need a few tools for your rest. Let's talk about that. You're gonna need to monitor that temp. I use the ThermaPen from ThermaWorks. ThermaPen 1, it's great, I highly recommend it. Also, for my proteins, if I'm gonna leave them in the smoker and I wanna just be able to monitor that from a distance, I stick a meter in there. This is the Meter Plus, it's wireless. You just push this into your protein. For if you're gonna be around the smoker, and you're just gonna be hanging out, you can always just, or use this as a secondary check, stick this into your protein. This is the ThermoPro meat thermometer. You just stick that in, you pick your protein, you can set alarms and whatever you wanna do. This is the first meat thermometer I ever got, and it's never let me down, so I still use that. I'll leave links to all that below. I'll leave a link to some butcher paper, a link to some foil, you know. It's easier to order everything off Amazon nowadays. Make barbecue, experiment, figure out what you and your kin like, and use these tools to your advantage. But if there's something I didn't cover here, guys, let me know, and I will answer your questions in the comments down below. I hope you enjoyed this video on the rest. After all this talking, I feel like I need a rest. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to smash that like button for me, subscribe to my channel, and hit the notification bell. That way you know when I put out new content. Also, make sure and share your favorite videos of mine with your friends on social media. That helps me grow and it helps me out so much. So for everybody that decides to share these videos, like, comment, subscribe, thank y'all so much. I've had great growth on the channel lately, and you know, it just really motivates me to keep making this content for you guys. So thank y'all so much, and we'll see y'all in the next video.